Hello, and welcome back to the Nurture and Flow podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Weaver. I'm a full spectrum doula here in Los Angeles, and for the last 8 years, I've been helping families have better birth experiences, even if we have to deviate from the plan. This week, we are in the middle of my series, Birth Ready, A Partner's Guide to Birth. This series really had partners in mind. It's really designed to support partners, that means you, through pregnancy, birth, postpartum from a doula's perspective. When we think about a doula's perspective, I'm talking about from a holistic point of view. We tend to think about you not only considering evidence-based care, but also empathy. For me, it's trauma-informed care, it's cultural based, and considering those things to help someone through the birthing process. Particularly for me, there's all kinds of ways that I support clients, but since I'm talking from my perspective, I will talk from Andrea's doula perspective. Okay, so today's episode is the birth team, right? A partner's role and responsibilities, and a lot of us have all these people in place, but we don't know our role. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how you can actively participate and support in the birthing process. So understanding your role on a birth team is super crucial, right? It does a couple of things. Understanding your role as a partner helps clarify what you'll be doing, what you'll be responsible for, and how you can support. It is not separate from the birth team, which could be your OB, your midwife, or your doctor, could be your midwife, could be your doula, could be your postpartum doula. You are a part of that circle of people providing care for the person you love. You are not this extra. You are a part of this. It's a synergy that's happening, right? And sometimes it may not feel that way, but if you go back to episode 1, where I talk about how you just show up for yourself first, you'll see why this matters. When we're clarifying our role, I think the first thing we can do is talk about the different roles that people play within this process. And there's a couple of different folks that you can have on your birth team. For me, or not for me, but for our purposes, we're going to talk about the experience generally that I have with my clients as a doula. When we're thinking about clarifying your role, is to do two things. One is to make you feel empowered in what you can do, right? The best analogy that I can give you is traffic and driving in your car. If you try to drive for someone else's car while you're driving, you're going to get in a car accident. In this instance, there may be times where you switch over into another lane so you can get off the freeway. Maybe you need to speed up and get around somebody, but getting back in your lane where you're familiar, you know what you're supposed to be doing, helps out way more than trying to do all things. And that goes for anybody on the birth team. When we're thinking about a birth team, we also want to think about why they're there, why it's important, why your partner needs or doesn't need these people in your birth team. Today, we're going to talk about a doula, a midwife, your doctor, which is an obstetrics gynecologist, and you, and how that birth team works. But that does not mean it's limited. It just means that at the core of what I've seen often is this. But I've also seen where someone has two partners, and so that works out, right? Or someone doesn't have a doula. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to define them for you today. And then I'm going to talk about how this synergy works and you work with this to make sure that your partner is feeling really supported. So first things first, since you're talking to a doula, I'm going to talk about me as a doula, but I'm going to first give you the definition of what a doula is and isn't. So a doula is a trained professional, whether ancestral like me or educated, also like me, who provides physical, emotional, and information support to birthing families before, during, and after childbirth. For me as a doula, my care is from a Black inclusive doula's perspective. I start with trauma-informed care and go from there because it usually covers everybody. A doula really is a trusted companion who honors cultural traditions, understands historical context, and advocates for equitable care. That's my center. Some doulas are also don't want to birth at home or only birth at home. I am full spectrum, so I'll birth anywhere you want to birth. Your doula should also empower you to make informed decisions. You should be your diverse perspective should be respected. There should be a lot of empathy. I can never say that word right. And there should be cultural sensitivity, right? They're this person that you guys lock arms with. And not only does your doula support your partner, they support you in supporting your partner and help you navigate some of the medical jargon that's thrown at you. And it doesn't necessarily matter how long someone's been a doula. Sorry, folks, doesn't matter how many classes they've taken, doesn't matter. What matters is that you all are connected, that the information that you're receiving, you're giving options and choices and ways to think about this process, and not someone telling you what to do. That is not a doula's job to tell you what to do. It's a doula's job to help you make informed decisions. And with informed decisions, they have to give you information for you to be able to make those decisions, not coerce you, not convince you, but for you to make decisions on your own so that you can feel confident in this process long after your doula has moved on. Next, we're going to talk about a midwife. Now, a midwife is a healthcare provider specializing in supporting individuals through pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. Midwives also have an individualized approach. Sometimes they'll have like birth centers, think birth centers, people when they're birthing at home, a midwife comes. It's very much one-on-one. Now they may rotate through a couple of midwives outside of a medical system. That's what we're talking about. Those kind of midwives, not within a medical system. So I know Kaiser has midwives. I think Alta Bates in the Bay Area also has midwives. I think UCLA has midwives. That's within their medical system, and they're great. They aren't what we consider midwives outside of that space. So I want to make that distinction. It's definitely more individualized care. Some midwives have a practice where you'll be familiar with 2 or 3 other midwives, depending on when you're birthing your baby, so that there's a familiar face in the room. You see the same people all the time, right? Now, in my experience, and I think one of the most important things, and if you go back to episode 1, I talked about this. When you're choosing these people, it's important to consider what's important to you when choosing this person. For me, from an inclusive perspective, I think midwives really serve as really guardians and like a holistic approach of the physiological process that your body goes through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And they're looking at you as a person, and they have medical knowledge to help assist you with the birth, but it isn't so the hoopla of being in the hospital is not there. A great midwife is also going to inform you. They're going to include you in care. They're not going to make decisions for you. Now, in an emergency, of course, decisions have to be made at any point, right? Any good doula will tell you that. Any good midwife will tell you that. But a midwife is trained very well in helping families bring their babies earthside. They are outside of our normal medical system while still trained in the medical system, but bringing on some of the things that we often look for: individualized care. Some focus on inclusive care. Some midwives only birth at home. Some midwives only birth at the birth center. Some midwives are, like I said, in the medical system itself as an additional buffer to, say, an OBGYN. Which leads me to an OBGYN, or the doctor, the pregnant lady's doctor, right? An obstetrician gynecologist, or an OBGYN, is a medical doctor specializing in women's reproductive health, including pregnancy, childbirth, and gynecological conditions, all things vaginas, wombs. Oh, that's really what that means, okay? they are who we normally first see, even before you see your midwife or choose a midwife. For most of us, we go to our OB, we're referred out, they do all the tests and whatnot. An OB is in a medical setting. So if you have Kaiser or if you have Anthem, or I'm here in LA, so we have, maybe you go to Cedars, or in the Bay, you go to Sutter, or you go to Alta Bates. This is where you'll see your OB, and they're within a practice with several other OBs and medical practitioners, including your nurses, that help provide support with your birth. Now, your OB you may see regularly, or maybe you rotate through some of the doctors that are on staff at your prenatal appointments, and they also may or may not be able to show up to your birth, where a doula and a midwife generally show up at your birth, unless you have a quick baby, and that doesn't happen often. They are science-based, medical focused, and really are thinking about your medical care in the framework of the medical system. Now, that's not saying that that's a bad thing. That actually might be right for you. That's why those interviews in the beginning are so, so important. You have to figure out what works for you. Listen, home births are great, but it's not for everybody, right? Water births are great, but they may not be for everybody, right? Where you birth may be more important. How you birth is more important. And so which one of these between a midwife and an OB is going to be the most helpful on that journey for you? And you have to figure that out. So please hear me, and hear me good when I tell you, making this decision is based on what you need. Full stop. OBs are great. They are great. You also have to find the ones that work for you, right? All of these choices that you get to make, you also get to choose your OB. Even if in the dire of circumstances, even if resources aren't a thing for you and your family, like this immense amount of resources, you can request to change an OB if someone is ignoring you, not treating you right, dismissing you, right? There are ways to do that, and we'll get there in this series, so don't you worry. Now let's talk about you on the birth team. So as a partner, you're there when the office doors close and lock up for the day. You are there on the day-to-day. Even if you're a co-parent and you're not in the same household, you have way more access than we do, than a doula, than a midwife, than your mother-in-law, right? Like, you have this access, right? So you're there during childbirth and postpartum period, and it's really multifaceted and a crucial part in providing support, comfort, and advocacy for the birthing person. You serve as a source of emotional reassurance, however that looks like for you and your partner, physical assistance, depending on what that looks like for you and your partner, and decision-making collaboration throughout the entire birth journey. And I mean that, right? The birth journey is, as soon as that person's pregnant, that relationship you built or didn't build before, but during pregnancy, during labor and birth, and also in postpartum. And y'all get to decide what that looks like. And you get to what? Stay in your lane, right? And your lane is all encompassing. My lane as a doula, I can't get over into the OB lane. That's not my job. My job is not to be in the midwife's lane. Not my job, right? But when I stay in my lane and focus on my sweet spots, the things that I'm great at, then in partnership with everyone, it makes it a more enjoyable experience. And as a partner, you're the glue. You're the intermediary for everybody, right? You're the bridge to your partner, especially when it gets to the point where partners are more frustrated or uncomfortable or in the throes of labor. You become the center of a voice for your partner, right? And that could look like you attending, even in attending prenatal appointments, right? It doesn't have to just be labor. Like, I want you to get that out of your mind. It's not just labor. It's all things. There's so many things that happen leading up to labor, and there's so many things in the postpartum period. And let me just drop this gem on you. Postpartum recovery, like healing period, can take up to 2 years, 5 for some people. I'm going to say that one more time. It can take up to 2 years, sometimes 5 for people. That 6 to 8 weeks we hear, especially here in the US, is about recovery time so you can get back to work. And that's not shade. Some of us cannot go back, come up, some of us can't take 6 months off from work and still be able to maintain our homes and these bills, because rent is due on the first of every month. Okay. So let's be clear. But that 6 to 8 weeks is your partner, not you. Sorry, I'm used to talking to my pregnant folks. It is about recovery. And in that recovery process, your lives are going to be changed. It doesn't mean that it's diminished. It means that things have changed. And you, as a partner, you're assisting with that, right? Whether it's newborn care, whether it's getting them to and fro, whether it's buying a birth pillow or getting those snacks in the middle of the night or sending DoorDash to go get those snacks for your partner. That stuff is important. I don't care what anybody says. That stuff is important. Now, you can't be all things all the time to your partner, but what you're good at is what's more important. Now, if we talk about labor, partners, it actually varies, right? In my experience, partners comfort as much as they can, whether it's counter pressure, maybe they're helping lift the person, maybe they're helping them turn, maybe you're just a physical presence letting people know that you're not fooling around about your partner. You are not fucking around about what they said they want and what they don't want, right? You're making sure that that person's voice is heard. You're also observing and absorbing as much information as possible. Sometimes you might just be going on errands. Maybe you just getting ice. Maybe you just fanning. Maybe you maybe you massaging. Maybe you going again and getting some ice and water, whatever. You can find comfort in what you're doing matters. And if you're having a baby in any setting where there's staff, usually staff see you, and they should, and should be able to give you direction, especially if you're like, hey, how can I help? They're more than happy to, but they try not to assume, because some folks just don't feel comfortable. I've had Jewish clients where the husband doesn't want to look, you shouldn't look as the baby's coming out, so he's going to be overhead, but can do his things there. And that's something that you'll just do his things. He can support his partner up here where her head is at, giving her moral support and encouraging her, right? Or encouraging them, excuse me, in this process. And so I think during labor, it's really helping them manage pain and staying focused. You can serve, again, and I just want to lay into you about this, as a liaison in between the birthing person, the doula, healthcare provider, or the midwife, and making sure that their preferences are being advocated for during that process and things don't get lost in the sauce. The other part, and we talked about this in episode 1, is be involved. This is a part of it. You need to know what's going on so that you can help make decisions or make a decision if something comes up. That's why birth plans and postpartum plans are so important. We'll also get there in this series. In the postpartum period, partners provide assistance with household tasks, newborn care, care for your other kids that you might be taking care of, some emotional support, some of the recovery, and just really and really grounding your family and whatever that looks like. That's a big responsibility. It's not small. Now, you can't do everything. That's why you have a birth team, and you should have a postpartum team. We will get there as well to help that transition. I want you to remember that you're not going to get everything right. You're not going to be perfect. No one should be expecting that from you. And even if they do, that's not your business. You have to do your best. Now, you're going to have to stretch yourself for sure, right? We talked about the 80-20 rule. Well, we didn't talk about it here, but in the previous episode, where your partnership may have been a lot more level and levels out easier, during this period, it might start to maybe more heavy on you. Where it might have been 60-40 partner, now it's 80-20 you. Right? And that can feel like a lot of pressure. And so, yes, it is. Things are changing, but it doesn't have to be forever. It doesn't have to be grueling, and it doesn't have to be miserable. There are so many ways to be supported in that space. If you don't know, go back to episode 1, and I share a lot of those, and I'll share them throughout our series together. There's a lot of bonding that you should want to do. with your baby. Even if you have to go back to work after your person births the baby, bonding with your baby is important. Bonding with your kids is important. Bonding with your partner is important in postpartum. I can't tell you how much better people's recovery is when they feel connected to their partner and continue that intentionally. It can't be passive. It's something that you have to figure out what works for you and your partner and be flexible in what that looks like, because it's going to change. 6 weeks to 6 months is a totally different beast with a baby. And so considering that and always checking in and communicating, I know it's hard to communicate and be vulnerable, but be gentle with yourself, because guess what? You are having a baby too, and you matter in this process. You do. So really, if I had to define the role of a partner, it's by your presence, your commitment, and willingness to actively participate in this experience. That's it. Sounds simple, but as you just heard, there's all kinds of layers to that. And where your sweet spot is, that's the most important. So let's move on into how everybody in this scenario or any other scenario you think of work together, right? So if we're thinking about a midwife, a doula, you, the OB or doctor, again, I used the word synergy at the top of the episode, so I'm going to bring it back to center with us and talk about why it's important, right? It is about optimizing or bettering birth outcomes. With a birth team, it's comprehensive support. If we're only relying on your doctor, it's only going to be your doctor's support, and you don't have other ways to help field information to help you and your partner make really great decisions. That's even if the plan deviates. One of the things I tell my clients all the time is go ahead, get a pen. In your normal handwriting, write down every scenario you think is going to happen, great or not so great. And the one thing that you didn't write, great or not so great, is going to come up, right? And so what do we do in that situation? And when you have a birth team, it's not just on you to make the decision. It's not just on your partner to make the decision. It's on both of you to make that decision together. And with a robust team and the synergy, you get to make decisions that are informed or perspectives that are supportive and they're not biased, right? That's why in this birth team portion, I didn't include family, not because family is not important. They are. But I think in this space, it's way more intricate. We try not to be biased, although we may care about you and have built rapport, especially if you have a midwife and a doula. We have this individual care, but we're thinking about the things and considering some evidence-based information to help you make a decision that makes sense. And you get to help disseminate that information or ask more questions and then check in with your partner and kind of do that thing. So that's what that synergy looks like, right? Rinse and repeat. You asking questions, getting information, making decisions, reiterating those decision making, and starting that wheel all over again. I think there's some really key points to this, and so we're going to talk about those here. And I think communication and collaboration is one. The holistic support is 2. Advocacy is 3. And empowerment and education is 4. So when we talk about communication and collaboration, open communication with your birth team is super important, right? This makes sure that everyone's aware of what your birth partner's what the birthing person's preferences are, the medical history, any other considerations, especially if you have any cultural or religious considerations, reminding them and reiterating the people giving you care that those are important to you, right? Or your birth plan, where some folks wait till they have the baby so the father can call out the name of the baby. And we remind people of that throughout this process. So they told, like, I just had a baby in May. Shout out to Renee and Kev, such a beautiful baby. But that was what they did. They wanted to wait until they had their baby to find out what the baby was, gender wise. And so they told me, so I reminded staff, and then it reminded them to tell staff that they wanted to wait so that he could say the gender of the baby and nobody else, right? Or when I'm working with folks, some people don't like all that cheerleading in the room. And so partner and mom were saying that um, they she didn't like that. So the wife and the birthing wife doesn't like all that noise and felt like overstimulated by that. So I always told them one voice, no matter who was, a doctor in the room, nurses, hey, when it's time to start pushing and laboring, just one voice. And that one voice was her wife. And that was helpful. I would cue her in certain ways. I'd start off a count to show her wife how to call out and work through those contractions and labor and bear down. But I let that slide over to the wife so that was the voice she heard. And that empowered her in that moment. Where other people need as many voices like, yeah, do whatever. No, that's not everybody's preference, and that's okay, right? And so those are really great examples and positive examples, as you can tell, of what's important. It doesn't, all your decisions aren't just like in case of an emergency. They're important, but they're not all that. They are not only that, there are also the preferences that make you and your family feel important in the process, right? And so making sure you're going to those prenatal appointments, regular meetings, follow-up emails, especially when you're choosing someone in this process, really thinking through what this means. And so communication and collaboration, once you've established your team, really is consistent communication. It's a little easier when you have a doula, I will say that, but it's not impossible. You can do this without the extra folks. That's why I'm doing this podcast, because this information I'm telling you should not be behind a paywall. And it's not. I want you to know that you can have this information wherever you can get it. And I try to be as unbiased as I possibly can with the lens that I talked about earlier. But outside of that, you should be and should feel empowered to speak up and communicate and collaborate if you have to on behalf of, but most importantly in partnership with your partner to your birth team. So the holistic approach is each member of the birth team brings a unique expertise, right? Remember those lanes I was talking about? They bring a perspective, right? Doulas provide continuous emotional and physical support. Midwives focus on the holistic low intervention care, right? That's what we're talking about. And then while the OBGYNs give more of a medical expertise and interventions when necessary. Together, they all address different things depending on where you are in labor and delivery, or in pregnancy or postpartum. They all play a certain part. Some of us cannot have a midwife. That's just what it is. So how do we make this experience better? And it's by adding these other things and getting as much information as we need. It's still, if you need and require certain things, then figure out how to do that, even with what you have. I'm not telling you to go spend a whole bunch of money on extra services that you can't afford. What I'm telling you is that the services that you are provided, you are an active participant in your care, your baby's care, and your partner's care. You are. And so if we're thinking about that, we're in the holistic side. If we're bringing all those perspectives together, depending on the needs of the birthing person, right? We continue to promote physical comfort, emotional well-being, informed decision-making throughout labor, delivery, and postpartum, right? Even in pregnancy. That's the role of that holistic support. It's all things. It's not just one thing. It's all things. It's considering everything, right? Advocacy. So as a partner, this is probably one of the most is like at the core component. Some doulas are advocates. I happen to be an advocacy doula. Not all doulas are that way. So make sure you're asking your doula if that's important to you or you need support to do that. But it is, again, back to providing information and support and understanding and advocating for your needs. Now, sometimes all of your needs will not be met, right? Sometimes you're going to have to choose an alternative because that may not be available to said person, right? Whether it could be anything. It could be your hospital just straight up doesn't provide it. Sometimes it's access to a nearby hospital. Maybe you didn't make it to your hospital and now you gotta have to kind of wiggle around and be more on the advocacy side, right? And I think partners really do serve as a strong advocate, actively supporting their partner, particularly in birth, continue to talk about those birth preferences, period, right? Advocacy could also look like reminding your partner that they can do this. Whatever this is, whether it's birthing vaginally, whether it's birthing through C-section, the baby's still coming, right? Regardless. And I want to remind you that vaginal birth is great. C-sections are sometimes necessary. They just are. I know. A doula cannot guarantee a vaginal birth. A midwife cannot guarantee a vaginal birth. A doctor cannot guarantee a vaginal birth. However, I think it's important to remember that however the baby is birthed, the things that are going to be seared in your brains is how people took care of you, no matter how that process went. It's truly not that. Yes, we should be asking questions. We should be doing all the things. We should be informed when we have to make a decision about having a C-section. But don't just simply avoid a C-section because you heard something. You heard that it's better. Better for who? Is it worth traumatizing yourselves as parents through vaginal birth if you just genuinely cannot birth this baby vaginally? Is it worth the partner's life if we can't deliver vaginally? Is it worth the baby's life if we can't deliver vaginally? And so, not to, be a Debbie Downer, but there's something there that we have to remember, that the advocacy part isn't guaranteeing anything other than the experience that you would like to have. And I think it's important to remember that although, having a full birth team doesn't guarantee that there won't be complications. Doesn't guarantee that. What it does do is empower you to make decisions when it comes time for you to make decisions. It's way different. It's way different walking into a situation and being afraid, right? And being startled by information, but remembering the cues that I'll be teaching you throughout this series and have taught so many people over time, to remember. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know the questions you need to ask to help you make those decisions. Okay. And lastly, empowerment and education. Hopefully you just felt empowered by what I just said. But by empowering the birth person with knowledge and confidence, which will come from your doula or your midwife or your podcast that you're listening to, wink, wink, shameless plug, the birth team promotes positive birth experiences and outcomes. That's it. Not the best, not the perfect, not the no. Positive experiences throughout. It may not be positive to hear that you're going to have a C-section. It may not be positive to hear that someone might be preeclamptic, right? However, it's much better to know what those mean because you've asked the questions and you can make decisions that best fit you and your family. I'm telling you, there's nothing like it, right? I think one of the things that we forget in this process is knowledge is power. And if someone is denying you that, then you sure as shit better find a way to get that person out of there and get someone that does. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I don't think that we should be easy on that. You're not going to become a doctor leaving out of this space, but you'll be informed about you, your baby, and your partner's healthcare needs. Never, ever, ever say might as well. Well, we might as well. Absolutely not. There is no might as well when it comes to your care. You are a participant. Your partner is a participant in the care of you all, and this baby. Full stop. There is no might as well. There is either a yes or a no. And say no often, not to be combative. It makes your yeses more meaningful. I think a lot of us are so used to being in medical spaces. A lot of us are going to birth babies in hospitals, and that doesn't have to be a negative experience. It might mean, though, that you're going to have to advocate a little harder. Not all hospitals follow holistic views or even consider them your cultural practices. And I get that. Not all of us can do that. But what are ways that we can avoid it? There's plenty. Or to limit it, I should say. Maybe not avoid is the wrong word, but I think limit that. And when you feel empowered to do that, when you know what you can limit, it makes those decisions so much better, right? I think sometimes we get scared because our partner is in agony, or it looks like they're in agony, and or maybe we didn't prepare the way that we thought we should have, and that still doesn't mean that you just say might as well, or let someone convince you or threaten you into making decisions. No, you need to be empowered and educated in every decision that is made going forward, including you, partner. Yes, we're talking about you. Yes, the pregnant person needs to know all these things, but you do too. Okay. And then lastly, continuity of care. It really ensures care throughout the process. That's all the birth team does, is making sure that everybody is on board and understands the goal. And everybody brings their perspective to help make sure this happens. And no one, doula, midwife, doctor, should be over talking, should be coercing, should be threatening you or your partner to make a decision. If there is an emergency, they will not be talking. They will be rolling whoever down the hallway for an emergency. A lot of times you have time to think about the answer. The best way to do that, and we'll talk about this more in collaborating on care, and I think that's the next episode, is what that looks like in real time. How do you navigate when things are coming up, or there's interventions that are needed, or there's complications, or there's a change in plan? Like, how do we navigate that, and what do we do with that information? And I want you to know that with great continuity of care, what I mean is there's, again, the word synergy. It's taking all these perspectives, coming back, huddling together with your partner and saying, okay, here are our options. What do we want to do? Hey, we need more information. Hey, we need more information. Okay, me and partner figure out what this is. And then we say, okay, we've made a decision. Not everybody is there honing in and hasn't, like, no, you need a moment sometimes. And a lot of times you have a moment to make a decision. Trust me, you do. Okay. Now, making sure, and I just want to, like, as we wrap up this piece, communicating with your birth team about expectations, attending prenatal appointments, asking how you can assist from a doula's guidance, from your midwife, from your OB, are all within your realm. So do that and keep asking and keep pushing for information. Again, be gentle with yourself. Right? Don't feel like you have to be everything in all things, but communicating with your birth team and communicating with your partner and deciding what you want to do and how you'd be helpful is great. And throughout the pregnancy process, you might find you're way more helpful than you thought you could be. And that's my goal. I really hope after this series that you leave here and you're like, you know what? I may not be super outspoken, but I know my partner loves a good massage. Maybe that's your sweet spot. Oh, maybe I'm the person that feels family through, huh? We're gonna talk about that soon. Maybe you're the person that's it's not you all's first baby, and you feel comfortable getting in there and doing the counter pressure and helping them coach through. And maybe that's who you are. Maybe you don't want to cut the cord because it might make you faint. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But you can help in these other ways. And I want you to feel empowered to find out how you, as an individual with this individual baby and this individual partner birthing this baby, can support. Not the way everybody else supports, damn sure not the way TV shows it. You have to figure out what that means for you. And there's all kinds of resources, myself, other doctors, other folks on YouTube, other folks, other podcasts that give really great suggestions for folks. And a lot of times, I know we don't talk a lot about partners, but you can find, even if you look at or listen to other podcasts or listen to audiobooks or read books, you can read between the lines into where you can support. And again, if worst case scenario, just ask someone and see what they think and how you can be supportive. And last but not least, remember to communicate with your partner. And so That's a wrap. That's the end of our episode today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you. I'm going to drop some resources in the bottom of this in the show notes and on my page for you to find some articles and books, some cool freebies for you and your partner to look over. But for this episode specifically, I want you to look at the three documents: what to ask your doula, what to ask your midwife, and what to ask your OB when you're deciding on those folks and why it's important. So I add a little blurb in there about why each of these people are important and considering them for your own birth team. You may not need one or the other, or decide that you want one and don't want to have the other, or you want to have everybody. Great. You can make that decision, but just some questions to really be thinking about as you're choosing your birth team and why it's important to you. You can find me on all things Nurture and Flow Birth. I'm Andrea Weaver, your friendly neighborhood doula, and I will see you next time. Thanks.